Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching World Today. I'm your host Umar Khalid. And today, as is the norm of our show, we discuss different issues that affect the world. Now, our first topic, of course, will be the situation in Kashmir. 42 days and 13 hours have passed by since the lockdown in Kashmir began, when India scrapped the Articles 370 and 35A and put a curfew-like situation in the Indian occupied Kashmir. People do not have the access to medicine or to their necessities of daily lives. On top of that, so many youth have been tortured, have been put into jails. The political leaders who also voiced concern over the situation have been put into jails. And it does not look as if the situation is going to come out of its current aggressive state as of now. This is, of course, being done by the draconian and fascist Modi government that continues to suppress the human rights in the Indian occupied Kashmir region. A lot of countries around the world, a lot of media around the world have also expressed concern over the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir, and that includes the United States as well. There have been various instances where congressmen from the United States have expressed their concern over what is happening as far as the human rights situation is concerned in the Indian occupied Kashmir region. And lately, 4 key US senators have expressed their concern on it. In the past as well, dozens of lawmakers have expressed their concern over the situation and what is happening in Indian occupied Kashmir, and they have demanded that the due rights be given to the people of the Indian occupied Kashmir, and the communications blackout that is also continuing in the region be also removed, so that the people in Indian occupied Kashmir can get to talk to their loved ones, whether in other parts of India or in other parts of the world. That is, of course, our first segment. Our second segment of the day is the prevailing tensions over the whole world, especially in the context of the US-Iran relationship. Now, as you know, that lately there have been drone attacks on Saudi oil facilities, Aramco facilities, and the US and Saudi Arabia have said that it is the work of Iran, whereas Iran has denied this. And this is not the first time the tensions have continued between the United States and Iran. Before also there was an oil tanker that was stopped by the US authorities, and that of course ensued. And before that, the US President Donald Trump also revoked the contract, the agreement that they had signed with Iran and the P5 powers as far as giving rights to Iran was concerned, and clamping down on some of the sanctions that they had put on Iran in the last couple of years. Now, this also is going to affect and is affecting the entire world. This is going to be our second major topic, and in the end, of course, we will talk about today's day, that is an ozone layer day. How important is the environment to us, and what are our responsibilities as citizens of the world, whether it be Pakistan or other parts of the world, to protect and preserve this environment? Well, these are the three topics that we will be talking about today. Let's begin with the first topic, but before that, let me introduce you my guests. My guest on my very right is Dr. Mansoor Akbar Kundi. We're a foreign affairs expert. Dr. Kundi, thank you very much to have joined us. Our second guest is former Ambassador Asif Durrani. Durrani sir, it's a pleasure to have you here. It's not the first time, and it's always our pleasure to have you here because you give us an insight into diplomatic relations between countries. Let's begin with you, Dr. Kundi. Now, and let's begin with our very first topic, that is the Kashmir lockdown. 42 days have passed by, and more than 42 days, in fact, 42 and a half days have passed by. There is still clampdown in Indian occupied Kashmir. There is still a denial of the different facilities to the people of Indian occupied Kashmir. There is a communications blackout. There are tortures, there are pellet injuries, there are then demonstrations, and results of that, there is a violence that is emanating in the whole region. Almost 1 million troops are present in India. A lot of pressure is coming now from international media, and now, as I said in the very introduction of my program, there are lawmakers around the world, this time from the US, who are also voicing their concern. Will this concern have any impact on India?
On India?
Yes. on the current situation that is present in Indian
When
occupied
I was
Kashmir?
coming here, I was thinking, I came here, drove myself, that the Muslim world has become very instable, and this Kashmir is a tragic and true reflection of that. What's going on in Kashmir, as you rightly mentioned, more than 42 days, Ambassador Saab will endorse me. It's violation of international law, international morality, democratic norms, human rights, and you name it. I can go ahead with terminology. And I believe all reflects on international morality in general, particular on India. India, which claim, and I had been teaching Indian political system for 12 years, claim the biggest democracy and this and constitutionally govern, it's negation of that. Negation of that. As you mentioned, they abrogated 370, which was the soul, and it was agreed upon. And Nehru signed, and Ambedkar, who was the actually maker behind Constitution. And the world appreciated. Now it's negation of that.
True.
So it will be a negative impact, I tell you. No one can gain happiness at cost of others' miseries.
But this pressure, what I'm trying to understand is, will the pressure from the different lawmakers around the world, whether it be the European Parliament, whether it be now the US lawmakers who are voicing their concern, will it have any impact on the current situation that is present and prevailing in Indian occupied Kashmir?
The answer can be yes and no. But if you see under morality, it should. It should. And there are many corners now coming up in support of Kashmir's rights and negation of what India is doing there. Kashmir has become densely army deployment province, state, area.
Of course, 1 million troops are present there as we speak.
Now they have reverted it to Union territory. Union territory is like Punjab province reverted to FATA. Just a crude example of that, which is constitutionally aberrant, which is constitutional violation of India itself and the people there. I mean, one thing I tell you, sometime you lose the battle but win the war. Today Kashmiris are suffering and we suffer for their suffering. But the time will come that they will come, inshallah, as victorious. They are now, and it's big problem for India. Honestly, I tell you, huge expenses, military deployment. And one thing more, the world is alarmed of. Muslim is, one thing is good about, true about Muslim, that he is emotional. And when he wakes up, flares up, he stands with Muslim suffering. Both are nuclear power, God forbids. If there is slight escalation of that, it won't be disaster for these two countries.
It will be a disaster for the entire region, in fact,
and
and
the
beyond.
Countries around. And one thing more, that I believe that America should play a role. Trump, like I was reading, he's on his way to many leaders to
United Nations.
UN session, and in there will be a big rally in support of and big gathering. Indians, Indian Americans, Republican government under Trump should not support it.
All right. The government and the Republic under Donald Trump should not support it, but we don't see any real action, do we, Asif Durrani Saab? US President Donald Trump has more than one occasion said that he would like to play the role of mediator between India and Pakistan. But India doesn't want to have any mediation. It says bilateral, we want to have bilateral talks because it's a bilateral issue. And on the other hand, it does not even get to have talks with Pakistan. It denies the Pakistani right to have those talks and Pakistan and India to have those talks on that issue. In fact, they are diverting it now, and if you've seen the latest statements, they say, oh, now the next talks will be on Pakistan occupied Kashmir, quote unquote. Where is all of this heading to, sir?
Well, there is a chaotic situation at the moment, and President Trump, he's a maverick, and he talks according to the audience. So if the audience thinks, he thinks that the audience will be supporting Indian contention, so he talks about the bilateralism. And then when he thinks that his audiences would appreciate mediation, so he would talk about the mediation. So that's there. My contention is, my personal view is that Kashmir, its struggle actually will be launched by the Kashmiri people to be supported by morally, politically, and diplomatically by Pakistan. This is our fight. We have to fight it out. How long it will take, no one can give you a satisfactory answer, but it will continue. It has continued for the past 7 decades, and it will continue perhaps.
But this time the situation has kind of changed, hasn't it? Since
There
the
has been,
clampdown and since the revocation of Articles 370.
The reason is that when we talk about Kashmir dispute, then all our disputes revolve around Kashmir dispute, except for Sir Creek. Otherwise, everything is concentrated on Kashmir, whether it's becoming a nuclear weapon state, or whether it's Siachen, or it's Kashmir, or the water disputes. Those are all concentrated in Kashmir, and nothing has been out of it, as I said, except for the Sir Creek. At the same time, the international community, which it will wake up, because one thing is very important, which we should not ignore, is the international media. International media
it's the
has
first time that they have
unanimously,
talked,
yes, for the
about
first
the Kashmir.
time ever, because I have gone through the 1965 papers and then 71 papers, newspapers, and you will not find this kind of support unanimously, which has been done by them. And here, the irony is that by doing away with or abrogating Article 370, it is the, you can say, replay of occupation. Because when Kashmir was occupied by the Indian forces, they were not asked. Instrument accession was signed by Maharaja, which is also doubtful.
Because there's sort of doubt on the date when it was signed.
No, not even, because Maharaja could not reach Jammu because of the weather and all that. So it's, Professor Alistair Lamb in his book, Birth of a Tragedy, Birth of a Legacy, he has quite elaborately discussed this, which Indians could not deny. So all you can say lies and deceits have been played out with the Kashmiris. So then, and then now, even under their constitution, the state, it was the state governor who already, there was governor's rule in the occupied state. So the will of the people has neither when it was occupied was ever ascertained, and now even when they have abrogated Article 370 has not been sought, that whether the Kashmiri people wanted abrogation of Article 370 as well as 335A. So here it is a blatant, sheer, you can say, fascism which is at its worst, which is being now replicated in this 21st century. We remember recently we had the Auschwitz Day last week or so, and they were recalling the atrocities perpetrated by the Germans against Jews. It is now in 21st century, and in this day and age when you cannot hide the news. Even in this day age, we don't know much about the Kashmir. So
apart from some of the videos and images that have leaked out with the international
But you
journalists.
cannot do it at will unless there is, the media is there, which can function smoothly. Internet facilities are there. People cannot even, if there are deaths, hospitals are not authorized to issue the death certificates. I mean, this is worst kind of atrocity being perpetrated.
And the torture on the youth, sir.
Everything. I mean, you can just imagine the worst kind of torture that is being perpetrated, just to bludgeon the people to submission. This has never happened. In fact, even the Indians, for the objective Indians, they feel ashamed at the international forum.
But they can't talk openly about it.
They cannot defend it. No, even those who dare to talk, they say we just cannot defend it. This is what you speak. I mean, I've gone through reports from Pravin Swane and then of course Arunadhiti Rai is always there.
But then all those people who try to say something sane about it, something logical about it, the truth about it, they're being put, cases are being put against them, or they are being put under house arrest. I mean, this is a state of continuous, how should I say, aggressive nature by the Indians, and they do not want to roll it back in any other manner. But that brings me to the very interesting question that I'd like to ask you, Dr. Kundi, is that Asif Durrani pointed out that the world needs to wake up. Now, our president, Dr. Arif Alvi, also in the joint sitting of the parliament, said very recently that the world needs to wake up. When will the world wake up?
You know, one thing I tell you, that this Kashmir situation was flashpoint in research papers and selective books. Now it has become a flashpoint on international media, and that's enough to wake them. And the world will wake them, you know. But the sad situation is that they should not be late to wake up. And as he mentioned, what's going on, it's a sad, very sad narration of establishment. Like you said, Yazid establishment, Hitler establishment,
Exactly.
Modi. If you look into history, I have been student of political history and establishment. There are many decisions. Like under Yazid, it was a decision directed, redirected.
But you know, whether it be, you talked about Yazid, you talked about Hitler, what did it end up into?
They ended up in a human tragedies.
Exactly.
And with a lesson for generation to come.
But has the generation learned? I mean, I don't see Narendra Modi and the RSS learning from
and
it.
more support for those who were targeted. Today, Kashmiris are targeted. There is no second opinion about that.
That is true, of course.
I mean, for the 42 days curfew, even in Second World War, the curfew could not long more than 7 days in Europe. In a situation where it was actually meant to protect population. But now it's more than 42 days. And one thing more, that human miseries are coming up in Kashmir. And the world should wake up to that. Otherwise, then there will be no respect for international law taught in the world's leading universities.
Exactly, because they will cite the example of Kashmir.
And now this UN inaugural session, few days after, you will see, I believe that there will be more speeches even from non-Muslim world in favor of Kashmir.
Well, that we will have to wait and see. But Asif Durrani Sahab, again, I will kind of revert to the world and to the situation in occupied Kashmir. Dr. Kundi very ably pointed out that in Europe, the lockdown could not go beyond 7 days. Here we are 42 days and counting. Is it because these are Muslims and not Jews or Christians? Is it because they are not in the West and they are in the subcontinent? What do you have to say on that?
It's a mixed package, I think. Yes, they are Muslims, and because if Muslims have been raising voices, they were termed as terrorists, especially after 9/11. I really recall I was in New York, freshly posted some 3 months before 9/11. And then the United States, before 9/11 was a different world. And afterwards, even Sikhs, a couple of Sikhs were targeted as Muslims.
Because they had beards.
Yes, they had beards. So this has happened. And United States, since the Bible Belt is quite strong there, and then they have been quite vocal as well, and they also sometimes promote their own agendas. They did that. But in the United States, even when you talk about these human rights violations, United States itself has been the violator of human rights in Iraq, in Afghanistan. This Guantanamo Bay itself,
that was exactly what I was
why would they create Guantanamo Bay? They should have applied their American laws, because American sovereignty was violated. And why would they put them in Guantanamo Bay? That is occupied territory. That is a Cuban territory. They would keep them because American law would not apply there. And a couple of those American citizens who were taken to United States, the courts had to free them. So this is also, so in a way, India in fact took benefit of that wave which was generated after the 9/11. And before that, there were even talks of mediation. Even Bill Clinton tried to do that, even after Kargil. At the same time, Indians were negotiating through the foreign secretary level talks with Pakistan, even if they would shy away talking about the Kashmir dispute. They would parry the question whenever the talks would be held about Kashmir. But they could not say no to the talks. They could not say the Kashmir is off agenda. Now they have dared saying this.
Exactly, and now they're even diverting it, as I said in the beginning, to Pakistan, so-called Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, when they refer to Azad.
Well, that's the maximalist position they have been adopting even before that, when they would say that yes, we will talk about, for us, the Kashmir dispute is the so-called POK. As far as our Kashmir is concerned, it's the integral part. So that was the maximalist position.
All right.
We know their maximalist and minimalist positions. But the question is, Kashmiris are revolting. It's not Pakistan. They are not doing it at my behest or at Pakistan's behest. They have to fulfill their aspirations which have been granted to them which as a right under the UN resolutions. They have been promised not by Pakistan but by the Indian leadership.
1951, 1957, I mean, nothing has been done. We're in 2019, sir, with all due respect.
Precisely, this is the point. And even after Shimla Agreement, it has also passed almost 50 years. Even when we invoked Article 6 of the Shimla Agreement in 1992 Foreign Secretary level talks, Indians were dragging their feet. Before that, in fact, they would always repeat the mantra that we will be discussing this issue under the Shimla Agreement. For consistent 2 years when we had eyeball to eyeball situation from 90 to 92. But when Pakistan invoked Article 6 of the Shimla Agreement, that okay, you said that we'll discuss this issue under Shimla Agreement, so we are invoking Article 6, which calls for the final settlement of the Kashmir dispute. From then onwards, on the table, they would never discuss Kashmir.
Because they want to
this is the duplicity.
the final
This
settlement.
is the duplicity, and unfortunately, I don't know the reason why this duplicity was never projected during subsequent talks or even in our frequent statements, even by our leaderships and others. So there is a need to persistently hammer out and remind the world and remind the Indians of their promises made to the Kashmiri people. So I think now that the time has come, because now there is a realization, and that realization is that enough is enough, because we have given many concessions to the Indians. We perhaps have been lying low, not raising this Kashmir dispute so frequently. It should have been, but I think now the momentum has been generated.
All right, the momentum is generated also in the United States. The next question is for both of you. I'll begin with you, Dr. Kundi, and then you can say with whatever you wanted to say before, and then we'll go to the question. My question to the both of you is, US elections are going to be held in the year 2020. A lot of other candidates are coming up, and some of those candidates are also voicing their concern for the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir. That plus what the US lawmakers are voicing as concern. Will this also put pressure on Donald Trump, who has a very friendly posture towards India? Because if we know well, they met in Biarritz at the G7 summit. Then he will be given the Bill and Melinda Gates a special award as well, Narendra Modi. And then there is a whole, gathering in the United States where Narendra Modi and Donald Trump will both be addressing the public. How do you view, sir, firstly to you, Dr. Kundi, and then to you, Asif Durrani Sahab, will the pressure exerted by other presidential candidates as well as the US lawmakers themselves might or might not, in your point of view, change the stance of Donald Trump towards action or not taken towards India in the context of Indian occupied Kashmir? Firstly, you, Dr. Kundi.
You know, you mind it if you have studied American political system, that elections matter from lower mayor level to county judge to President of America. It's not like Russia. Elections matter, public opinion matters, issues matter, and issues on human rights, I believe, will particularly matter in next year election. Under political conventions, the sitting president will be the candidate of the party in power.
True.
But now the candidate is still to be chosen from Democrat side. I have my analysis may be mistaken that on Afghanistan, mind it, Democrat candidate, if troops not withdrawn, would this time will highlight, if we come into power, we will withdraw troops from
Because that was one of the agenda on which Donald
Afghanistan.
Trump came into
And,
power.
and number two, Kashmir human rights situation. God forbids the situation goes bad then. I pray and I wishes situation relaxes and Kashmiris are at calm and peace. But it will be, it will be. And one thing more,
Yes.
it's not new. A sitting president have lost election, Carter lost election, you know, on Afghanistan situation. There are many flashpoints areas which matter in American election. I believe that there will be big pressure on Trump. And as ambassadors have mentioned, Maverick, I agree with that. He just takes a sudden U-turn.
As far as his audience is concerned, changes as per his audience.
Like so loudly, which matter. American, you know, in international structure, there are actors, nation state, and individuals are actors, like movement, PLO, Taliban, movements are actors, they bring changes. So vocally and abruptly, which I like, that I can play a role in Kashmir situation.
And he has
And
said
then
this time
after,
and again, not
after
even once.
half a week, he was a changed man. But one thing I tell you, his inner feeling, anti-Muslim feeling, can't be hidden. I believe he will
All right,
be,
it can't be
he
hidden.
will be
It is
given
there. It
a
is
tough
there.
time due to that too.
All right, all right, all right.
Because you know, his attitude towards Modi unnecessarily, being a student of international politics, I believe, more sympathetic and friendly.
All right. Asif Durrani Sahab, is it true? Is Donald Trump's attitude a bit anti-Muslim? Whether he has shown it deliberately or openly or not? And secondly, as I pointed out the question, what will be the impact on the next year's elections in the United States as far as the pressure being exerted by the US lawmakers as far as, and also the other presidential candidates are concerned? They're voicing concern for Indian occupied Kashmir.
I think let's, for the time being, not talk about anti-Muslim agenda of President Trump.
All right.
We'll go to the face value, and I think he also has Muslim supporters in the Republican ranks. But at the same time, other prospective candidates for the presidency, they have already talked about Kashmir. And if hopefully it will become an agenda point during their primaries when they, and it will shape up things. Because if you recall about Afghanistan, Trump from the very beginning started saying that I'll pull out troops, I'll pull out the troops.
Exactly.
And then he also had some harsh words about Pakistan then as well. He did say it after becoming president, but once he realized the ground realities, then he had to take a U-turn, and then he requested Prime Minister Imran Khan to help out smooth
With the Afghan peace process.
smooth withdrawal of American troops. So here, I think it would just not be the Kashmir dispute. Afghanistan is going to haunt. It is going to haunt both Trump as well as the Democrats. And that will also determine the the way the Kashmir subject would be taken up.
All right.
Reason being that here Pakistan is an important player as far as Afghan situation is concerned. And I think they'll have to take into account Pakistan's sensibilities when they will talk about Afghanistan. And Pakistan's sensibilities are just not only peace in Afghanistan. It also means that its own national security sensitivities are to be kept in mind.
Exactly, the amount of people that we've lost.
Yes, and I think that's why I think President Trump, even if he might have changed some goalposts, saying mediation to bilateral issues, but at the same time, President Trump has all the time when he raised these subjects with Mr. Modi, Indian commentators have said that he has been raising the human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. And this question is also haunting Mr. Modi when he was talking to French president, when he had telephonic conversation with Prime Minister British Prime Minister Robinson and Johnson, and similarly other heads of, especially during the G7 summit.
All right.
So these issues are haunting. So American elections, definitely it will become, of course, under the shadow of Afghanistan, but at the same time, Kashmir issue will be an agenda point, and a strong discussion is likely to take place during the primaries.
All right. Let's continue this discussion about the United States. Our second topic is also concerning the United States, but this time it's as far as its relations with Iran are concerned. You know, the relationship between the US and Iran has always been very thorny. In the previous US regime, there was a whole agreement that was signed between Iran and the P5, and they had decided, all right, we'll cut back on the sanctions that are put on Iran so that it can continue to kind of how should I say, live as per normal standards, economically and otherwise. But under Trump, he has kind of rolled back this agreement as far as the US side is concerned, despite the different discussions that he has also had with European leaders. He has still not budged on his position. Then comes the situation of the oil tanker in Gibraltar that is stopped by the US and
the British.
By the British, and then the whole lot of it, but it was of course backed by the US, yes. And there was a whole list of accusations and counter accusations. Then then Iran retaliated, and then so on and so forth. Now comes the issue of the Saudi oil strikes, the Aramco sites that were bombarded by drone attacks. Now, Saudi Arabia or US claims, especially the US claim that Iran is behind it, has been rejected by Iran itself. On the other hand, it says that it is ready for any war-like situation if that is imposed on it. Where is all this region going? Already we have one volatile situation in Indian occupied Kashmir, two nuclear powers that have come face to face. On the other hand, on one side we've got Iran and all the escalations of tensions with the United States and also with Israel. Of course, there are also tensions within the Muslim world on that and other issues. How do you see that developing? Because that is also a huge flashpoint.
You're right. It's getting serious, but at the same time, look at it. The United States has failed. As far as Iran is concerned, they put up worst kind of sanctions. They thought that Iran would succumb to the pressure, but Iran did not. At the same time, Iran has found strategic partners in the shape of China and Russia. And Iran and Russia have together, they have defeated the Daesh in Iraq and Syria. The credit goes undoubtedly to them because the United States was on the other side of the fight. United States thought that they will bring about regime change excuse me, in Syria. They failed, they could not. And then in the case of the Gulf region, Iran threatened that if we cannot export oil, we will not allow They did not, in fact, fulfill that threat to a greater extent, but at the same time, they have created a situation whereby now the whole region is almost on turmoil, and it is the situation is getting serious. There's a need for sanity because Saudis should also know that since 2015, when they launched attacks on Yemen, they have lost almost $300 billion and almost $100 billion by the UAE. And they are still counting, and at no gains to them, in fact, and their national securities are at stake. And the United States has only offered assurances to the Saudis, but at the same time, Mr. Trump hastened to add that they'll get money. So here the game is open. The game is open in a way that the United States is getting money. The whole tension in the region, if you look at it, is actually revolving around selling weapons. Already, United States has sold weapons to the tune of $300 billion to Saudis and to the UAE. And I think they will still continue to sell more weapons. This is not adding any dividends in either to the Saudis or to the Iranians. The best way is, which was initiated by Pakistan, to have mediation. Iranians did agree, but Saudis rejected that. There is a dire need because for Pakistan this would be a challenge, and this is a challenge because for us we will be in a quandary. What to do, because Saudis, we have best of our relationship, so is with Iran. Iran is our neighbor, and then Iran and Pakistan have always stood by each other in irrespective of the crises and all that. We may have certain differences in perceptions, including on Yemen and other issues, but on strategic issues, Iran and Pakistan have been together. I have been ambassador there, so I can vouch for that.
All right.
Similarly, with Saudi Arabia, because of the holy places, for us, it is a matter of life and death. So if some harm comes to Saudi Arabia, I think Pakistan cannot sit idle. And
Exactly.
Saudis also have been assured on that, that when it comes to Saudi's national security, then we'll stand by Saudis. So, but this balancing act is quite tricky. This balancing act is very sensitive, and it would be quite a challenge for Pakistan. God forbid if the situation goes out of control, especially with regard to Iran and Saudi tiff which is going on, if it gets serious.
All right, Dr. Kundi, there is a OIC summit that has been requested by Saudi Arabia on another topic, and there's another meeting going on between Turkey and Iran as well as we speak on another issue, of course, but of course a Middle East issue. Now, do you feel that this current tension that is present and this finger pointing at Iran by the United States will also become the topic, or will be part of the agenda as far as these talks are concerned? And do you feel there is a future to US-Iran talks in this context after the current spate of tensions?
You know how one can answer, I believe it will be. And as Ambassador Saab mentioned, he has a practical insight, serve as ambassador. The situation between America and Iran is not new here. Since 79, the revolution came, their relations strained, and to this day. And one thing I tell you, if you look into Islamic world, Iran has stood since then as a nation state, never compromised its security for sovereignty or sovereignty for security. I remember a few words from late, God bless his soul, Gul, General Gul, that countries which compromise their sovereignty for security either lose both or deserve none. They have. The current situation now is alarming. And as it happened, I mean, on 14th, America didn't mention directly, but indirectly said, we know who did it. I mean, who can be the second party except Iran? I believe diplomatically they should not have said like that, because international diplomacy and bilateral has its own norms. Number two, situation in Yemen for the last since 15 has been alarming too. Saudi Arabia, our friend, and one thing more I tell you, even in international politics, it's difficult for a country when the enemy of my enemy is friend situation comes.
Exactly.
But it's more difficult when two friendly countries, when two friends fight, it becomes even more difficult. Pakistan in present situation is like that.
As he said, in a quandary.
Yeah, Iran, our good neighbor, an immediate neighbor. Saudi Arabia, our brother country, which has helped us.
All right.
But this mounting situation can be mitigated through Pakistan mediation, UN mediation, and regional mediation.
All right.
And one thing I mention you more: the world is no more unipolar now.
Of course,
It's
that we know.
changing.
We've seen.
Now, like Taliban went to Russia, big move, and I tell you honestly, it will make now America rethink about their
All right,
policy.
all right, all right. Well, that's very important to see in the current context, because the world is no longer unipolar. So that will kind of maybe change the way the Iran and US relations come up in the future, or change or diversify in the coming days. Only time will tell, I tell you, Asif Durrani Sahab and Dr. Kundi. But my final topic, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for these two very important discussions, because they were very loaded and we could have done even an hour or even more on that. But our very last topic for today is today's day, that is the ozone layer day. We know about climate change. We know that Pakistan is one of the most affected countries as far as climate change is concerned, and the current government is also taking a lot of steps as far as that is concerned. One of those being the banning of plastics from Islamabad and now also from other cities in Pakistan. It's very important for us, and it's our duty and responsibility, ladies and gentlemen, as citizens of Pakistan, as citizens of the world, to be environmentally friendly. Not only that, to be environmentally responsible, because if we do not do as has been told by the United Nations time and again, and as we see in the current spate of climate change and the effects that it has on the crops, on the animal life, and on human life as well, the day will not be far when we will rue the day we did not make that change for ourselves, for our societies, and for our nation. Umar, Khalid bids you farewell from today's episode of World Today. Thank you very much to both our guests, Dr. Kundi and Ambassador Asif Durrani Sahab. Allah Hafiz.